Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. Today, my guest is Dr. Michael Rich. And Dr. Rich is a pediatrician. Also, I love this, known as the mediatrician, and the founder of the Digital Wellness Lab out of Boston Children's Hospital. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We talk about this nonstop. And yet, at the end of every conversation, we still are left with questions. So we're hoping today that you're going to give us the definitive, and parents are going to walk away just feeling so empowered. That's not a tall order.
No, it's not. It's not, but it's doable. That's the important thing.
Beautiful. Okay, so the first thing I want to start with is just like, what's the state of affairs right now? You know, it's been such a rocky 2 years. And every week we're kind of like feeling like something's new and different. So what is the state of affairs when it comes to our kids, middle school and high schoolers, using technology and overusing technology?
Well, this is an issue that pre-existed the pandemic and lockdown and what I call the year of learning remotely. And I think that we have to take a look back to before COVID, or BC, as I say, and see that we were already headed this direction. And what the lockdown and remote schooling did is it plunged us overnight into sort of all screens all the time for learning, for connecting, for social life, for entertainment. But I think that the key issue here is that we have to consciously change our relationship with these devices. We, prior to COVID, we used them as toys and as entertainment. And they were never supposed to be used that way. They really are very powerful tools. And we should approach using these tools and introducing them to our kids and using them with their kids the way we would introduce, say, an electric power saw or teaching them to drive a car, which is we should be present in their lives. We should be involved with helping them learn to use these powerful tools in ways that help them be healthier, smarter, and kinder to each other.
All right, well, that's such a perfect segue to the next question, which I'll tell you that every time we have this conversation, the last question from a parent is, but what monitoring device should I use? So I'm going to start with that one. Do you believe, depending on the age of the kid, whether it's middle school or high school, that there should be parental controls and monitoring devices with our kids?
Well, I want to roll that question back a little bit and talk about the way we talk about it. We talk about monitoring. We talk about controlling. There is no kid on the face of the earth that wants to be controlled by their parents, by their teachers, by anybody. We should reset our relationship with it and with our children to be about parental engagement, not parental controls. So one of the encouraging things is that parents already have those kind of skills in hand, but just change the relationship with the device as not a toy we're handing the kid, but as if we are sending the kid to a party at someone's house. And what do we know about that house? What do we know about whether there's alcohol or weapons or drugs at this party? And we need to be involved in our children's lives. So I think we have to take a step back from handing our infant an iPad or handing our toddler a smartphone to distract them as the electronic babysitter, but to really understand that we are handing them a powerful tool that they need to learn to use when they need it and when they can handle it in ways that are responsible and respectful of themselves and others. And so I strongly recommend that parents introduce these devices when the child is ready for them and actually needs them, but not when they are just using them as a pacifier in the short term.
Okay, so our audience is middle school and high school parents. So those kids already have the tool. So
right.
Now, how do we backpedal if we didn't do a great job of it?
Exactly. Well, we engage with the children around it. I think that one of the things that is really helpful is letting this be an open space where we can parent the child as well. Have your child's passwords. Have your child's have access to your child's digital world. Not because you're going to be surveilling them all the time, but because you can. And so what that functions as is essentially the same as random drug testing in the workplace, which is they behave differently when they know you can know what's going on. And they will learn to manage it well. Now, will they do it perfectly? Absolutely not. No, kids are always going to push the limits. They're always going to change things. But what we want to do as much as possible is to not let this become their private space where they can do whatever they want. Remember, these kids are not going to develop executive functions like impulse control, future thinking, cause and effect until their mid to late 20s, right? And at age, 13, that we're handing them, the world, essentially. We're handing them a smartphone that can access anything. They can legally go anywhere online. And what we don't want to make it is something bad that they do. We don't want to make it as something punishable, because then they subvert the system. Then they go underground, and they will, have Finstas, for example, fake Instagram accounts, and they will. What that does is it turns the internet and social media and anything they can access there into rock and roll, which mom and dad don't understand, mom and dad don't like, and I like it even more because of that, because it's mine, right? It ties perfectly into their autonomy seeking that is normative for adolescence. So what we need to do is have it be as open a space as, for example, school is, to parents, and make ourselves available to the kids so that they feel okay asking us when something upsets them, confuses them, whatever.
So the password idea is a great one, and it's so easy to do when you hand them the phone, and it's a condition of getting the phone. But it's really hard to do if you've got a high school sophomore, junior, senior. Like, how do you? Is there?
Who bought the phone and who pays the account?
Yeah, but that's a control thing. You just said they don't like
Well,
that.
no, it's not a control thing. Control is sort of restricting and fencing off areas. What this is it's a responsibility that they are taking on, and they have to see it as a responsibility, just as if you hand them the keys to the family car. If you bought the car and if you pay the insurance on it, which goes up dramatically once a teenager starts driving it, then they need to take on the responsibility for handling it with the freedom that they want. With each freedom comes responsibility. And yes, it is a step back, but we faced this once before when pediatricians said, get TVs out of bedrooms, right? And people said, oh, it's been there for 4 years. I can't take it out. That's not true. You can take it out. It wasn't so long ago that cars didn't have, seatbelts in them. A generation ago, cars didn't have seatbelts in them. That doesn't mean that you can't learn to be safer and better with it.
Okay, so it is a battle, though. It's going to, excuse me, it's going to get a reaction from your kid if you say the rules have changed. So can you give us any guidance on how you set that up for the best outcome?
Sure. I mean, I think that you can say we didn't know, right? We didn't know before that you would be safer if you had a seatbelt in the car. We didn't know before if that various things could harm you or you could get into trouble in various ways online. But we know now, and because of that, we want to give you the space to be as free as you can manage the responsibility, but also to protect you, to keep you safe. And I think that, yes, they're going to push back because they believe that they have a divine right to have their smartphone and go anywhere they want with anybody they want. But the reality is that they define privacy as so mom and dad can't see. right? They could care less about what the rest of the world sees. And so, I think at whatever point we enter that cycle, one of the rules that I often encourage kids to do is what I call the grandma rule. Don't put anything online that you don't want grandma to see, because she can.
Okay, we have a question from Christina. Sorry about this.
No.
Can you share best practices on Snapchat where parents have limited engagement and viewing capabilities and kids feel the messages disappear?
Yes, the messages do disappear unless someone screen grabs them. So that isn't a guarantee. I think that when you introduce Snapchat or any platform or device, you do it with the young person, and you do it talking explicitly about how to use it, how not to use it, the risks of, going out of bounds with it. Snapchat is still a realm where if you sext on it, and someone, grabs it, you are functionally guilty of child pornography. So I think that kids need to be aware that there are consequences, and they also need to, with the parent, decide what those consequences should be if they overstep.
And again, these are probably people who don't know it as well as their parent, as well as their kids. So maybe the reverse is we ask them to teach us it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and that's a wonderful way of bonding over it, if you will. And I would extend that not just to Snapchat, but to things like video games. If parents are, worried about Fortnite or Call of Duty, instead of, wagging our finger at them and saying, I hate that, turn it off, sit down next to them and play the game with them. They will beat you, hands down, but you are entering their world in a way that says, I love you, I respect you, I want to understand what the draw is here, I want it, why it engages you so much. And then when you finally figure out how to steal cars in Grand Theft Auto, and you turn to your child and you ask, now, okay, I now know how to do this. Now let's talk about why we would want to practice this over and over. And you're coming from a very different place than when you are wagging a finger at them and reprimanding them. You are saying, I'm your student, but I'm also your parent, and we can learn this together.
Can we should we worry that addiction is related, their behavior can fall into addictive behavior with phone, with gaming, with whatever?
Okay, well, as I think we have so far the only clinic dedicated to kids who have problems with interactive media, that being gaming, social media, pornography, and what we're calling information binging, which is the endless YouTube videos or Reddit or other Quora, other sort of ways to go down the rabbit hole of the internet. And so we have been seeing kids who have problems managing this for more than 4 years now. And we have yet to see a kid for whom this is the primary problem and for whom it is actually an addiction. Now, why I say that is, when we say the word addiction or addict, we think about junkies in a shooting gallery or bums on Skid Row. We don't instantly think about our 10-year-old who is throwing a hissy fit because he's got to stop playing Fortnite and go to bed. And what we are dealing with here is not something like tobacco, alcohol, heroin, that the therapeutic goal is one of abstinence, of not using it at all. You don't need those for your lives. Unfortunately, kids need interactive media. They need the internet to function in school, to conduct a social life, to entertain themselves now. So the goal here is self-regulation, is being able to use them effectively. And so this is more akin, in our experience, to binge eating disorder, in the sense that it is overuse of a necessary resource, overuse that continues despite negative consequences to one's grades, to one's sleep, to one's family relationships. It is driven by psychological needs, not by the device or the application. So the kids who have problems with gaming, for example, often have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Kids who are having problems with social media often have anxiety, particularly social anxiety. And when you identify that underlying driver of these behaviors, treat that and combine it with behavioral modification, these kids pull themselves out of a tailspin. And we've really seen that the use of the word addiction, while it is a great lightning rod for grabbing people's attention, actually keeps kids from care, because parents don't see this as an issue early enough. And it's only when they're at their wits' end that they actually seek out help from a physician or a psychologist, and to try to modify the behavior. I think we need to help our kids learn to live in the digital environment. They move seamlessly between the physical world and the digital world. They do not see these as two separate worlds the way their parents do. And so I think we need to be very conscious of the fact that not only is this not an addiction, but everybody's use is somewhere on this continuum. And it's when it becomes impairing to, basic functions like sleep and school and eating normally, that it becomes a problem.
And do you think parents know, like they have a sense when it's crossed a line and that it's just not healthy anymore?
No, because the parents come in and say, I can't deal with this anymore. And the kid's saying, I'm just doing what everybody else does, right? So they get constant feedback from the kid who does not really have an orientation to the larger world. They just think that what they're doing is what everybody else is doing. And the reason for that is, if you go online to, say, League of Legends, there are people on there 24/7 because it's played by people around the world. And so what they look at it as is it's a constant ongoing thing, and there's no stopping to it. Mom and dad say, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're not doing your homework, you're not talking to me. And so I think they're at a loss because they're getting the standard adolescent pushback of, you just don't get it. You're not cool. You didn't grow up with this. And that they often sort of let it slide, mainly because, they're worried about, quote, worse things like sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
So how do we do this? We're getting smarter at this. It's still relatively new in our world of parenting. And when we go for a mental health care worker, should we be looking for something specific about them, or it doesn't matter, just get somebody?
I think that we're still at a place where we need to ask that person whether they feel comfortable with and competent at dealing with screen use issues. Many of our referrals at the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders are coming from therapists, pediatricians, psychologists who don't know how to do it. So part of what we're doing also is creating professional development and continuing education courses so that pediatricians, psychologists, et cetera, can become comfortable with this. It is not rocket science, really. It is really just old wine in a new bottle. And if we can give them the tools to see it that way and to manage not the behaviors directly, but the underlying driver of those behaviors simultaneously with behavioral modification, these kids can turn around, frankly, relatively quickly.
So one of the questions that we get asked all the time is this, like, I can't get my kid to stop the game to come to dinner, and that there's an incentive. They've been playing for so long that leaving, they lose everything.
Of course. And what we need to do is to help the kids and all of us, and that includes the parents, develop good behavior around devices. Oftentimes the same parents who are saying, I can't get my kid to quit playing video games and come to dinner, has their smartphone and is reading emails at dinner. And because this is important work. My stuff is important. Your stuff is not, right? And the kids don't buy that for a second. What I find is really helpful is to shift to a more mindful and directed use of everything, whether it be doing homework or gaming, and to create a daily schedule to where they do certain things at certain times. That way, their parent doesn't bug them in the middle of a game, but they are also under, the obligation to, if dinner is at 6 o'clock, to wrap up their gaming by or before. And I usually recommend before 6 o'clock, because if you try to run it right up to the top of the hour, you're going to run over because you'll be halfway through a game. So if you're playing a game that cycles every 20 minutes, you don't start a new one at quarter of. And that becomes much easier and much less of a conflict flashpoint with the parents, because the parent isn't constantly nagging at the child saying, dinner's coming up, dinner, oh, you're over. But more, sometimes the kid will say, can you give me a 15-minute warning? Can you give me whatever? And that means that's wrap up time. And that hands the responsibility for the behavior to the child. And the consequence, if they don't do it, is you turn the router off at 6 o'clock, right? You just put a immovable fence there. You don't have to do that in most cases. Sometimes you have to do it once so that they know you're for real. But we do ultimately have control over that information stream, whether it's by, paying their account or by control of the router in the house.
They're so smart, though. We once turned off phone service for a kid who, we didn't want a physical battle over taking the phone. And all of a sudden we see they're texting, like texts are coming up. And it's like,
Right.
They're just smarter. So it put us at a disadvantage in this conversation.
Yes and no, but and the key word you just said was conversation. It has to be an ongoing conversation. So the point is not you're being bad and we're going to cut you off. The point is, this is not helping you. This is in fact hindering you. And I need to work with you to put controls, or I hate the word control, to put limitations in place so that you can know where the playing field is, where the sidelines are, where the goal lines are. And, I would rather not have to penalize you. I don't want to penalize you. But if you step out of bounds repeatedly, we're going to have to enforce those guidelines through technical means, right? You take a phone away, they go onto Wi-Fi. You take the router out, right? Eventually, they will get the fact that they need to do it for themselves. Because there's nothing worse than being halfway through a game and having it just go black because mom or dad pulled the plug.
So I love what you just said, and also with this comment. So Partis says Discord is another platform that kids are using to have private chats and groups. And what that says to me is we're never going to be ahead of them. So putting monitored, like, I know you don't love the word, but trying to have external controls to help us is only one part of this conversation.
Well, you'll say they're always one step ahead of us. Why not be in step with each other? Why not have them, learn with you and demonstrate to you that they can manage this? Discord can be turned off like anything else. Discord has got kind of a bad name because it came up as, in the gaming community, and it sort of became a place where kids did bad things. There is nothing inherently bad about Discord or Snapchat or Instagram. What we have to be aware of is our behaviors with those platforms, with those devices, and to help our kids understand that their behavior online is as important and potentially as life influencing as their behavior in the street, in the playground, at school. And that not only are there external laws in place that control this, but it's going to affect their development. It's going to affect the kind of person that they develop into and the kind of person they're representing themselves to the world as. And that's where we really get in trouble with social media, which is that we tend to use social media the way corporations do, which is to market ourselves to the world, to show the best things in our lives. And I think we lost a lot when friend became a verb, in the sense that we friended as many people as we could as if it were some kind of a score in a game. But were these true friends? And it devalued the value of friendship. And ultimately, good relationships are not built on how good looking you are or what a hot boyfriend we have or what a great vacation we've been on. They're built on our limitations and our needs for each other, our needs to be connected in deep and meaningful and sustaining ways with each other, rather than just admiring how perfect someone is.
That's really helpful. Christina would like to know what your thoughts are on taking electronics away at bedtime, and when do we stop that?
I would say that, first of all, it shouldn't be about taking them away so much as training the kid to give them away, to charge them in the kitchen or charge them in a common space. And that is just sort of the way it goes. I think that it's good to figure out how much sleep your child needs. Most kids who are going to school have a fixed wake up time every morning. We have to remember that adolescents need more sleep than they needed when they were younger children. They need really 9 to 11 hours of sleep physiologically. I'm happy when we can get 8, but to calculate back from that hard wake up time, the number of hours you need to sleep, and then an hour before that is when all light emitting screens should be turned off. That includes television, that includes phones, that includes computers, everything that emits light, to help them slow down, get drowsy, and get into the rhythm of sleep, and allow the melatonin to be secreted. So I think that it's not so much about enforcing it from the outside in as building it in from the inside out, which ultimately is what we're doing throughout adolescence, is moving them from a child who is disciplined externally to an adult who is disciplined internally.
All right, you talk to kids a lot.
All the time.
What are they telling you that we're getting wrong? Like, if my parents would only blah, blah, blah.
If my parents would only listen to me. The single most, I am in a very subversive way. When I'm with a kid alone in the exam room, I say, what could your parents do better? And I would say that 3/4 of the time, the first thing out of their mouths is pay more attention to me. Right. So we have to also realize that we are staring at these screens a lot more than we should. We are not being present for our kids. And not only is that, making them feel lonely and disconnected, but it is also modeling for them that this is the way adults behave. Right. Kids hear 1% of what we say, but 100% of what we do. And so I think that it's really important for us to live the way that we hope our kids will live. And so I do think that the most important thing is really, even though they seem to be nonverbal, sullen, is to talk to them. And this is why one of the most valuable things you can do with your kids is have a sit-down family meal once a day without devices. Not only is it good for their nutrition, it's really good for their mental health to have a place where they can debrief, where they can unload, where they can complain about their algebra teacher or talk about this exciting new thing that's happening in their lives. They won't talk all the time, but they will eventually talk to you. And most importantly, they will know that the door is open for that communication when they feel ready for it.
Okay, so number 1, listen, pay attention to us. Just in terms of trends you're seeing, what's most popular right now? Like, I feel like often we're late to the game. We catch on as soon as they're getting bored with it. So what are you seeing now?
I think kids are still very much involved with TikTok. TikTok is front and center. Discord is still very big. And it's sort of evolved into a gathering place, sort of an open-ended, sort of open house party, where kids connect. A lot of kids use Snapchat. Uh, they have, I have to help them, and we as parents have to help them understand that all of these platforms have built-in hooks to keep you glued to the screen. Snapchat developed snap streaks, right? So that I have to snap somebody every day for as many days as I possibly can, even if I'm showing them a picture of my big toe. And they get caught up in the sort of algorithms, they get caught up in the protocols and not using it as that power tool that it is to do what it does well.
Yeah, I mean, I decided to take a peek at TikTok. I had to like take it off my phone because
it sucks you in.
It so sucked me in. Such a time suck.
Absolutely.
And with no good feelings at the end of it. Nothing good coming from it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of the things I also talk to kids about is after you've had time online, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's gaming or whatever, take a moment to think about what you have to show for the last hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, right? What do you have? How do you feel? And what do you have that you didn't have at the beginning, And compare that to, taking a walk or doing your homework or shooting hoops or just hanging out and talking, and help them realize that they are being manipulated. One of the ways that we finally broke through, the cigarette thing as being cool is when kids realized that they were being manipulated by a bunch of, businessmen in a back room to hook them on cigarettes. Now, of course, we've since been end run by vaping, of course, and now we have to do it all over again. But it was when kids realized that they were being played for fools, that they said, no way, I'm not going there.
I love that conversation. I don't think that's come up before when we've talked about this. I ask them how they feel when they're done and what did they get. I love that. Yeah. I think for not even just for our kids. I think we should all be
for ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. My last question for you, Dr. Michael Rich, is what's the one takeaway you want for parents?
To understand that first of all, that parenting is as much an art as a science, that we can use science of developmental psychology and education to guide us. But ultimately, every kid is different, and we are kind of playing jazz here with our kids. We are sort of seeing where they go and how they respond. And in this particular case, we are trying to follow 3 moving targets. One being the developmental arc of the young person. The second being the ever evolving, often rapidly evolving digital environment, which is both affecting that development and reflecting that development as they post and communicate on it. And the third thing is the change in all of our behavior because we have these devices in our pockets or on our wrists. And it's only going to get more so as we move into the metaverse, as we move into more and more immersive technologies. And we need to learn from our mistakes, many of which we made during the lockdown and the pandemic and stuff. But we shouldn't feel guilty about them. Because it's more of an art than a science, we are going to make mistakes. Instead of dwelling on the mistakes we've made, let's learn from them. Let's not waste any extra energy feeling guilty or ashamed or somehow we're blowing it as parents. To acknowledge to our kids that we too are learning, that we too are human, and ask our kids to get involved in policing us, if you will, right? And noting when we are staring at our screens, and really to frankly to move it out of the police and surveillance and control mode, and more into supporting all of our success, helping us all be more the people we want to be, who are smart and thoughtful and kind to each other.
Dr. Michael Rich, what a great half hour with you. Thank you so much. Really wonderful advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.